Handling Life with Nathan Tabor. Are you ready to learn how to handle life instead of letting life handle you? If so, this podcast is exactly what you need.
I'm Nathan Tabor, and I want to talk with you about handling life. At times it feels like life handles us instead of us handling it. And one of those topics is forgiveness, or forgiving, or forgive. And when you think about that, it really comes down to forgiveness isn't easy. That's one of the reasons why this is so hard to talk about, because it really gets into me, gets into the personal side of it. It gets into you, because someone's done us wrong, right? They've hurt us. So two things kind of pop up here. We either are, macho, like, I'm not going to talk about this because it didn't hurt me and it didn't bother me. Or it's, I don't want to talk about it because it did hurt and I really don't know what to say. I don't want to really express myself. This wasn't fair. It doesn't make sense. Essentially I got the short end of the stick. Have you been there before where someone has done you wrong? It's been a work related, or it's been a family, or the gym, or something has gone wrong, right? And so as we've hurt, as we've taken on this, we've developed how we deal with it. And a lot of the times, even in my own life, and this is one that if you've listened to my story, really took me for a ride. Because I got to the point where I dwelled on matters. It consumed me. It took over who I was. My motivation, my drive, my passion, which are all good things, were all kind of based on or based out of something that had gone wrong. And I wanted to prove someone else. I wanted to prove to someone else. I wanted to prove to them that they weren't right. And, it became a lifestyle. But it was, the dwelling on it, the constant dragging of it out of and putting it into my life, and, had gotten woven into my fabric. And then, the vengeance. And so if you're stuck on dwelling on it and it's always in the back of your mind and sometimes it's on the front, that's not good. That's not where forgiveness, that's not how we should deal with something. And if you transition into the vengeance part, I want to get someone back. Been there too. And if you've ever tried to get someone back, it might be satisfying for the moment, right? But it never ends up the way we want it to, because like the little cartoons and growing up, it always backfires. There's always a consequence or a reaction that we didn't expect or we didn't plan for. As we work through this forgiveness, it's hard. It makes our blood pressure go up. It makes our blood pressure just out of whack. It heats us up. It boils us. That's not the way we should deal with this. We should not deal with something that's been done to us wrong with our emotions, in the sense of we shouldn't let it take us over. But I want to acknowledge that pill, the act that someone has done to us, is really hard to swallow, right? Because normally in our lives, in my life, the people who I've been done wrong by, or something been betrayed, it's been a family member, it's been a close friend, it's been a business associate, it's been someone that I loved, or someone that I trusted. So not only was the thing that happened hard, what really multiplied it, what made it worse, was that it was done to me by someone that I didn't expect it from. And that really adds to that emotion. It adds to the vengeance. It adds to the bitterness, is when you've been done wrong by someone that should have had your back. I hear this all the time, time heals all wounds. Maybe that person was never hurt, because whoever said that, in my opinion, I don't know if you use the word idiot, but it's the first one that comes to mind, because time in and of itself does not heal wounds. I just had the unfortunate experience, and I won't show you an image of it because it was really disgusting, of a nylon dog leash rubbing against my leg as the dog ran past me, and I didn't get out of the way fast enough, and it bloodied my leg. It created this serious wound. Well, if I had just left it up to time, it would have got infected. It would have taken a lot longer to heal. It could have caused other medical conditions. So, I had to go in and painfully wash it out and put, alcohol and peroxide on it. And you see this being peroxide, if you ever put it on a wound, it bubbles up. And then I had to put Neosporin and an antibacterial cream on it. And it took almost 2 weeks before it just stopped, I won't go into details, but the wound, and it finally before it scabbed over. And then it took time for the scab. And so time does heal, but in that you have to take steps during that time to assist, to push forward, to help with the process. Because had I just left my wound open, it would have been horrible. Not only would at the time the dog would have pulled the leash across me, had I not done anything, actually time would have made it worse, because it would have gotten more painful. It had gotten infected. So the same thing happens to us in our life. When I have been hurt and I didn't deal with it right, and I kind of pushed it down into my emotional subconscious or didn't want to deal with it, it didn't get better. Time didn't make it pass on. What time did is let it fester. Let bacteria grow around it. It let it grow. If you've ever seen mold grow, it starts out really small, but if you don't address it, what happens? By the way, if you're sharing pictures on Instagram or Facebook and you're in your kitchen or your bathroom, do make sure the mold in the back is clean, right? Because people can see that. It happens, though, to us in our life. When we don't deal with things, when we let it fester and grow, people start to see it in our lives, just like you see it in people's pictures, just like you would see it on my leg. If you don't deal with something right, people will start to notice it. So don't take this attitude of, oh, macho me, it was no big deal. It can happen to anybody. I could care less. I don't care about that person. That didn't matter to me. That's not what you need to be doing. That's what I did for a long time. It doesn't work. It doesn't turn out the way you want it to. If you don't address that problem, if you don't address what happened to you, it's going to continue to get worse inside of you. And every time it comes up, when you take the macho me approach, and every time it comes up, you just plant it down deeper. You push it down, and that's what you don't want to do. For a long time, I buried the thoughts and the emotions and the feelings that I had. I set out on this path to prove people wrong, to what they had said and what they had done, they weren't right. And as my businesses grew and as I began to prosper, my focus, my foundation was wrong. How do you think that turned out? Have you been there? Are you trying to do something right now in your life because you want to prove someone wrong? When you think about it, what should we try? Who should we be trying to prove either wrong, or who should we try to glorify? We should be trying to glorify God with our actions in our life. But instead, we're over here, I was over here, and you might be over here trying to prove someone else wrong. If you're on that path, let me tell you, it doesn't end well. Because your focus is wrong. Your motivation is wrong. And at some point, you're going to make a misstep. Vengeance is going to come in. Bitterness is going to come in. Something's not going to work out for you, and it's going to crumble. Now, it might not outwardly crumble, but it's inwardly You're going to get to the point where it's just not worth it. The misery or the pain or the aggravation or just how you treat other people. You're not going to like that. And then, we've talked a little bit about the vengeance side. If you're creeping into that of, I'm daydreaming. I'm constantly thinking about how can I get this person back, or how can I get this company back who did me wrong? What is that doing to you? I can tell you what it did to me. I wasted time. I wasted energy. I wasted efforts. I burnt bridges. Instead of focusing on what I needed to focus on, I was focused on what I wanted to do to somebody that had done something to me months or years ago. It doesn't work out. And then you can ultimately, as my daddy used to say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. I'd go get an attorney and sue someone, and I was right, but I still ended up being wrong because of all the time and money, because of all the time and money and energy that I had wasted. So if you're constantly thinking about how do I get this person back, that's a warning sign. So if you're in the macho me, or you're in the vengeance side, or you're in the whatever side, don't be there, because what we really need to strive and what we need to be working on is forgiveness. And forgiveness ultimately is I like this little saying here. Forgiveness is me giving up my right to hurt you for hurting me. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Treat someone else the way you want to be treated. What happened in my life, and is probably happening in yours, and if it's not, it will. I started treating others the way someone else had treated me that I didn't like. So here I am, bitter, mad, vengeance, adjective you want to throw in there about what this person over here had done to me. But then here I am, hypocrite and all, treating someone else exactly the same way. I mean, the hypocrisy in it. When I finally kind of woke up to this and was like, this is not right. It's making me miserable, and it's making everyone else around me miserable. So the problem, when I got, right down to it, of digging into it, my feelings were hurt. My ego was bruised. I had been hurt. I'd been done wrong. But instead of addressing it right up front and dealing with it, going to the person or persons and talking, I just internalized it. I kept saying to myself, what have I done to deserve this? What did I do wrong? What could I have done to make this other person not do this? And all these thoughts were running through my head. But as I started going through the problem, I started going through who I was and how to deal with forgiveness in my life and bitterness. Do you know also what popped up? And something that down deep that I really, really did not want to deal with. And it's something you don't want to deal with either. What was my role in this? In some, you can say, I had no role in this at all. This was 100% on them, and sometimes that's the case. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes I was to blame, or partially to blame, for my role, for my attitude, for my words, for my demeanor, for my actions, and how I dealt with the situation that led to the point of where I had been done wrong. But at the time, I didn't want to deal with that, so I just rationalized in my mind that I was the victim, that I was the one that had been done wrong. Everything was everybody else's fault, and that was the problem. The problem was all them. Nothing to do with me. But down deep, I knew there were some things I needed to address. as I went through this process, and as you go through this process, the first things I always wanted to talk about and the first things I always wanted to put out there was the things that had been done wrong to me. You know, the person who had embezzled money from my company, the contractor who hadn't done the work he had been paid for, the candidate who was running for office who didn't pay for his website. And I have a background in real estate, and I had a pastor who's also a friend who embezzled money from me while I was going on a trip. He was collecting rent and deposited into his own account. And then, you know, I could sit here for the next 12 hours and read you a list of things that people did wrong to me. And oh, woe is me, and how bad I've been done, and how everybody, you know, didn't like me, and wrong time, wrong situation, you know, wrong time, wrong place, and all of that. But as you notice, everything I read off there is about me. What people did wrong to me. You know, you could write a book about what people have done wrong to you, right? You could sit down and just from the earliest memories that you have, all the things that didn't go your way. But what's missing in here? What didn't I just talk about? I talked about a little bit, briefly, on what my role was in some of these. Like the person who embezzled money from me, you know, I could have, you know, put better checks and balances in place so he didn't have control of the money the way he did. I mean, I could have done some things there to have kept him from being tempted to have done that, but ultimately it's all him. But you notice in any of this list so far what I've not talked about? So in 2014 I stopped and I really started thinking about this mental game that I had going on in my mind, that everybody had been doing me wrong, and all the things that had been done wrong against me, all the people who had betrayed me, and it hit me. Who all had I done like that? Who all had I betrayed? Who had I done wrong? Whose toes had I stepped on? And I started to go through that. It changed my perspective on forgiveness. My self-centeredness, my ego, and my pride had led me to that everybody was just doing me wrong. And everybody just needed to come to me and apologize and make things right. I was rationalizing my behavior. Well, if they've done me this way, I can do other people that way. I didn't say it like that, but that's the way I was acting. You know, you see those little plaques. Words mean nothing, actions mean everything, or you know, something along those lines. And that's what it was. My words over here of, you know, I'm treating everyone fair and right didn't match up to the way I was doing things. It essentially gave me a license in my mind, an AKA an excuse, to just do and be and act however I wanted to. And so now here I am in my mind. Up to this point, all these people have done me wrong. Everything is their fault. I'm the victim. Therefore, I have the right to go do and act and be to everyone else the way everyone else has been to me, but I'm okay in doing that. They're the wrong ones, and they're wrong for not understanding, but I'm okay with this. So the hypocrisy then is kind of full circle, right? I'm the victim because people have done me wrong, but then I have the right to do other people wrong because I've been done wrong, therefore I'm right. I mean, that is not good logic, right? That's not common sense. But at the time, it made perfect sense to me. I had every right to be that way. And if you're there, and if you feel that way, if you're acting that way, you know, snap out of it. You don't have the right. You don't have the right to be that way and to act that way. Right now where you are, it might be working out for you. It worked out for me for a long time. But where it leads, And the type of person it leads you to is not where you want to go. It's not someone you want to be. Ultimately, I became the person that I said that I used to despise, or not hate, but that I hated. I didn't like that type of personality. And I became that type of person. So, is it all about you? Are you the person who's always been done wrong, but you've never done anyone wrong? Because forgiveness is a two-way street. Yes, people have done you wrong. People did me wrong. They need to come and make that right. But the other side of the street is, I've done people wrong, and you've done people wrong, and we need to go make it right. Bitterness, that seed of bitterness, made me lose stability in my life. It didn't happen instantaneously. It wasn't like, oh, somebody did me wrong, and now all of a sudden I'm, unstable. It happened over time. The pain, the frustration, the constantly playing the victim. It took time for me to realize I wasn't dealing with this right in my life. It took me time to change once I did realize it. I had to go through the process. I had to essentially stop being a hypocrite. I had to stop saying one thing and acting another. I had to stop holding grudges against people who had done me wrong. I had to stop treating other people the way they didn't want to be treated. I needed to treat them the way they should have been treated. And I needed to have a really in-depth look at myself on how I thought about and how I perceived and how I implemented forgiveness in my life. And so I want you to think about it this way. Holding a grudge doesn't make you strong. It makes you bitter. Forgiving doesn't make you weak. It sets you free. Now, in our society today, that goes against the flow, right? Be macho. Don't show your emotions. Don't be vulnerable. And don't forgive anybody. Keep your foot on their neck, on their throat until they cry uncle. And if you're not from the South, uncle's when you twist someone's arm and basically make them submit, and you don't let go until they cry uncle. That's not how we should be living. So what I want to talk with you about today are the 3 steps that I took in my life to deal with forgiveness or implementing forgiveness and dealing with bitterness. And I want to encourage you to really dig in and be honest with yourself. Because you know what I found? Most people already know if you're struggling with something. They just don't know how to talk to you about it. And so to look at these, really consider, really think. Is this something I need to do in my life? And so the first step I took was, and I really had to deal with my pride here, I had to deal with my ego and my self-centeredness, was I sat down and I made a list of everyone that I could think of that I had ever done wrong. Any conflict I had had, business or personal, anything from high school on forward. And as I sat there and made that list, it was like, wow. I mean, really? God, do I really have to go back to this person? Do I really have to deal with this? But as I sat there and I wrote that down, it really gave me a glimpse, a picture of who I was and how I was treating others. I went back to high school and apologized to teachers who I had kind of made fun of or not been the best person or student I should have been. I went back to people that I had business conflicts with and said, I know we left on not so good terms. There was a dispute about money owed. I went back to family and I went back to friends. But you know what? As I did this, yes, it was embarrassing. It was hard to send emails and text and phone calls and to say, hey, I'm sorry. I wasn't right. I handled this wrong. No excuses. I didn't put in there, but the reason I said this is because no, it was about me asking for forgiveness, not explaining myself, not rationalizing that why I was the victim. But as I did this, do you know what happened? I faced my fears. I dealt with my embarrassment. I went through this process. But as I did it, it's like the seed of bitterness, the burden, all the pent up and built up, just kind of like came out. It was very therapeutic. It was like, wow, I mean, going back to someone and saying that I was sorry, that I shouldn't have acted this way. Yeah, it was hard. I'm not going to kid you. I'm not going to pull like, oh, that was the easiest thing I've ever done. But it was oddly fulfilling. It made me feel like that I was actually the person that I wanted to be, that I was an honest, that I had integrity, that I was trying to make things right. And so now in my life, when I do something wrong, and sometimes it's, not sometimes, most of the time, if not all the time, it's still hard. Because I have to deal with my pride, and I have to deal with, my self-centeredness, my ego, my selfishness but they did the reason I got to go through this, but ultimately it comes down to, this is not about them. Reaching out to someone and apologizing is about me. It's about my relationship with God and doing what He has told me to do, and that is to ask for forgiveness. And I needed to do that. I needed to make it right. And so I want to encourage you, sit down, write a list. Who have you done wrong? What conflict is in your life? If you can't talk to them on the phone, write them a letter, write them an email. But leave out the personal, leave out your excuse, leave out your victim mentality. The second list that I made, the second step in this, was making a list of everyone who had done me wrong. Everything that I could think of, family, friends, business relationships, whatever it was. Now, this wasn't the hard part because I kind of knew that off memory, right? You probably do too. I mean, you could rattle off everybody who's done you wrong like that. I mean, just snap your finger, here's a Excel sheet of 1,500, right? Easy. But here's the hard part. Forgive others so you can be forgiven, the Lord's Prayer. It would depend on which version you read and then how the words are. But in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus gives the disciples an index sentence. How to remember it is to forgive others so you can be forgiven. And so as I sat there and made this list, God, that one really hurt. I mean, that next one I just wrote down, it still hurts today. I mean, it was hard to sit there and make a list, but then start striving to forgive these people, to start praying for them, to start trying to love them. And as I talk about this, I want to challenge you in this. Get rid of that bitterness towards people. Peter asked Jesus, how many times should I forgive? 7 times 70. It was an infinity. It was every time. There are still things in my life today that happened 20 years ago that when I think about it, if I were to focus on it, it would just, my face would get red, the veins would pop out on my neck. You have those too. Everybody has them. Some have more than others, but we all have those ones that just, man, they hurt. They got on the inside of us for whatever reason or how, but it doesn't matter. We got to love. We got to forgive. And if we want to handle life, this is part of it, is to commit to forgive others. Some people you might have to forgive every day. You might have to forgive them 10 times a day of something they've done. Now, if somebody continues to hurt you, love them from afar, right? Be like, hey, I really, you're nice and all that, and maybe you're in your family, but I can't be around you because too much is happening, until they get to the point that they are. But go back through, make a list of everyone who has done you wrong, and commit and start praying and focusing on forgiving, loving, caring for, and see what happens in your life. It's incredible. The effects of this, what the benefit it has to my life and then it will have to your life, way outweighs the initial uncomfortable feeling, the non-desire, like I don't want to do that. I want to hold on to this because if I don't, they'll do it again, and come through with all these excuses. Put all those to the sides and just do it. In the third step, and this is just as hard as the first step and the second step, is repetition, repeating, auditing, evaluating, going through step 1 and step 2. It's not a one-time process. It's not do it, put it over on the shelf or close your computer and it's done. This is something I have to do every day. This is something that I love to play racquetball. If I'm playing racquetball and my temper gets out of control and I say something that is warranted, but I don't say it the right way, my temper gets the best of me, I force myself immediately there to address it. You know what happens when you address something immediately? It really teaches you, if you're paying attention and if you're doing it out of the right heart, not to do that again. Because it's one thing to send somebody an email or call them, but when you stand right in front of someone and say, hey, I'm sorry, I should not have reacted that way, or I shouldn't have said that, and you mean it, they understand it, but now you've built up, it's embarrassed you a little bit, it's dealt with your pride, but it's also set the bar on what type of person you are. So, focus on that. Focus on step 1, write down everybody who's done you wrong. Step 1, write down everybody that you've done wrong. Step 2, write down everybody who has done you wrong. And step 3, continue to repeat step 1 and step 2. As you'll find in your life as you do this, the way you're able to handle things, the way you're able to deal with things becomes so much easier. Now, in doing all of this, there's only one way you can truly do it and it be sustainable, and that is through your relationship with Jesus Christ, your walk with God, and you're leaning on the Holy Spirit. Getting in God's Word, developing your prayer life. Because the desire to want to get bitter again about something that happened 5 years ago or 25 years ago, it's still there. As we talked earlier, the Peter and 7 times 70, it's still going to come back up. Something's going to be said, somebody's going to do something, you're going to see a picture of something, and all of a sudden here comes that anger and that bitterness. And at that moment, you have to be able to implement one of these steps. So work on your relationship with Jesus at the same time. This is how forgiveness works. You forgive others because Christ forgave you. Christ forgave me. Ask yourself this. When Christ forgave you, like Christ forgave me, had Christ ever done anything to us? Here he is forgiving us, but he's always done right. He's always been there for us. We're the ones who have offended him. We're the ones who have done him wrong. He's never done us wrong, but he's still willing to forgive us. And then I want to hold on to, and you want to hold on to something that happened in the past. Especially if someone's come to you and asked for forgiveness, and you're still not forgiving them, be careful. Don't let bitterness rule your life. Let forgiveness be the ruler of your life. Let Jesus, let God and the Holy Spirit. You really have the choice here. You can let life handle you, or you can handle life through your relationship with God. Remember this, forgiveness is not an occasional act, it is a constant attitude. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to the next time we can get together.
Thank you for listening today, and please share with your family, friends, and colleagues.